I know you were just coming into the studio when Nigel Hampton was finishing that interview with Guyan, but will you consider his call, which is that you need to widen the scope and you need to consider a manned re-entry to the Pike River mine?
No, we've had a discussion with the families back in January, made it clear first that any decision to go in there has to be made under our law in New Zealand, and despite the silly statements made by political parties like Labour and New Zealand First, a politician can't decide to send someone in there. So we've agreed with them to do unmanned entry. The technology's improved in 6 years. Those discussions have been ongoing for the last couple of months. There's now a work program agreed. Families don't agree with every aspect of the project, and we're ready to proceed.
But doesn't this footage that has come out in the last 12 hours or so actually quite significantly change the picture? You now know, because you can see, that manned re-entry, certainly at one stage, was safe.
Well, the police have just released a statement saying that the people in the video weren't in the drift. They were at the portal where they're required to They are, as I'm advised, required to wear breathing apparatus because of the safety issues. So the implication of the news item last night that they'd way down the drift seems to be not correct.
Without being able to ask the police questions about that, it's slightly difficult because we already know that one of the pieces of information that they put out last night is incorrect, which was that all the footage had been shown to the families, and that wasn't the case according to Sonia Rockhouse, who we just spoke to a few minutes ago. But on the evidential point of this, why was it, for example, that it only came to your attention last night that this existed?
Well, I don't know the answer to that question.
But should you have been told?
Well, I suppose I should have been if it was going to be relevant. It doesn't, on the face of it, change anything about the assessment of the safety of manned entry. The video footage was all available to the people who did the assessment for Solid Energy, as I understand it. Whether they saw this particular piece, I can't say. But the facts of the mine haven't changed, and that is it's inert because it's full of methane. Any oxygen gets in there, there's real trouble. The assessment was that of the dozens of risks associated with manned entry, they couldn't be sufficiently mitigated to decide to go in. OK,
there's something else that Nigel Hampton said that I suspect you didn't hear because you were just on your way into the studio, which was the point he made was the drift is made of stone, it's not made of coal. So to what extent does that matter, what the proportion of methane is in that particular area? Because you're not going into the area that is full of methane.
Well, you have to go through it to get to the mine. But look again, the assessment has to be made by the people who are in control of the workplace and the employees. It's their judgment in the end about whether it's safe, because if people go in there and they die because of an explosion, it's absolutely clear who would be responsible. That is the people who sent them in. And even if they took, then they'd have to show they took every reasonable step to mitigate the risk.
Should this have been shown to the government explicitly, this information, and should it also have been shown to the families?
Well, there's no reason why the families couldn't see it or the government couldn't see it.
But they hadn't been shown it until literally a couple of months ago. That was the first time they saw it, and it was leaked at that point. That's not the police coming to the families and saying, look, we have this information, you should see it.
Well, you'd have to take that up with the police. The statement I've heard from them has been the public one, which is they didn't see it as making that much difference. Now, on the face of it, I can understand why the families would be quite concerned given the way it's presented, because it's presented as if there are people well down the drift basically looking at the robot, which the police say is not actually the case. So those issues will get cleared up. But we have made the decision to provide money for unmanned entry, and that project is now being finalised with Solid Energy.
So it would seem that if the government hasn't seen this footage, the families haven't seen this footage, the Royal Commission didn't see this footage. Considering what it shows, or what it apparently shows, and considering it was leaked, which gives you the sense that perhaps it is of some value in itself, you've got to ask the question, why?
Well, I think there's yet to be seen what value it actually does have. On the face of it, and I haven't taken advice on this, from the material I saw back in January, it doesn't change any assessment about the safety of the mine. And it now appears, just this morning, that the implication that there are people down the drift somewhere looking pretty casual about it isn't correct, that actually they're at the portal. So look, that, as I said, that'll get worked out, what actually is that, what it does represent.
Even if, to be fair, even if this apparently overheating robot is right by the portal, isn't that in itself
No, what I've been very careful what I've said. What I've said is that the police have made a statement this morning that the people are by the portal. The robot is certainly down the drift, because several robots were sent down the drift, and that's where the footage comes from.
But the apparently overheating robot, somewhat down the drift, there's no explosion. There doesn't seem to be anything that happens as a result of that. So what is the implication of that?
Well,
does that then mean
again,
that actually people could go in?
Well, it tells you that there wasn't oxygen there, that it's inert because it's full of methane. But of course the risk is when you put people in there, that oxygen does get in, and if it doesn't get into that bit, that it gets into the next bit, which is geologically unsound. So again, we have had a clear position with the families after a discussion with them in January, and I accept that they don't agree with everything, and have focused on this project for unmanned entry to gather any further evidence that may help explain the tragedy that occurred there. And look, I can understand the families reacting strongly to this piece of video, and particularly the way it's been portrayed. I'm sure the experts in the police will be able to work through what it means or doesn't mean. We're working with the families on the unmanned entry.
What questions have you been asking of the police? And I appreciate it is only a few hours since this video came out, but what questions do you have or will you be asking of the police as to why this wasn't put in front of the Royal Commission?
Well, I haven't actually had the opportunity to ask them any questions. Minister Nick Smith's been working with them last night, as I understand it, and no doubt there'll be some answers to that today. The one so far is they didn't see it as evidentially relevant. I think there's still some uncertainty as to whether the video footage was available to the Royal Commission. I doubt the police would have the power to retain any evidence to keep it from the Royal Commission, and I can't see any reason why they would do that.
Do you think that the way the police have handled this has been good enough?
Well, I think we should look into it a bit further than just relying on the news item, because the news item itself I think, had a very strong point it was trying to make. That may not be the whole picture. The police, of course, have to follow the law. This has all been subject to a Royal Commission. It's all been subject to Official Information Act requests. It's all been subject to the safety assessment that was done by experts who needed to have access to all the information. So my understanding is that the video's been available. In fact, there was a request from the families just a few weeks or months ago with respect to the unmanned entry for all the video, and my understanding is that the police are in the process of copying it all so they can make it available.
So is there going to be any further action from you as a result of what has been seen on this video?
Well, we're just asking the same questions as anybody else about what value it has, whether it's been correctly available to the parties who should have been able to view it. We'll get answers to those questions. When
are you going to get those answers?
Well, I'd imagine we'll get some of them today. I think some of them have been answered to some extent. But again, I think we need to keep this in context. Whatever the rights and wrongs of who saw the video, the safety assessments that have been done take account of all the risks. In fact, they list them all out, and Solid Energy, as being responsible for that workplace, made the decision that manned entry was not possible. It
sounds like if you're expecting some answers today, it's been a pretty urgent please explain to the police on this one. Well, look, they'll answer the questions that are asked, I'm sure. Yeah, but in a very short time frame, is it fair to say that when you saw the news last night, when you became aware of what was going on, you needed to know exactly what the situation was, and you needed to know it yesterday?
Well, there's the practical matter on Sunday night. If you can find the police who actually know whether the people in the video are at the portal or down the mine, and people aren't always readily available on Sunday night. So look, those questions will be answered, but I think we should keep this in proportion. Whatever the answers to those questions, the decision about manned entry still has to be made by someone responsible for the workplace and the workers, and New Zealand First and Labour are being quite irresponsible, suggesting that somehow the government should make a political decision about entry. That is simply not possible under the law. What is possible is what we're doing, and that is working on a project for unmanned entry. That a lot of the work's been done, the project is being specified, and they're getting on with that in the next few months.
Bill English, the Prime Minister, thank you very much. Appreciate your time this morning on Morning Report. It's now 25 minutes to 8.